Lighten the mood a little bit.
So we're back from our bathroom break, and first one to go up will be Jacob.
Okay, doke.
So Jacob, this question's coming to you from an undergraduate. It says, as an undergrad, I've noticed that ASU&M can be very reluctant in taking a political stance.
Wait, can you start
Can you
again?
say,
There's-
can you start?
As an undergrad, I've noticed that ASU&M can be very reluctant taking a political stance when asked to by students. Where do you see the future of GPSA in taking a stance politically?
I think I'll start with the Clinton-esque answer of what do you mean by political. And to give you some critical insight, you know, when I was an undergraduate, it was right when the Proposition 8 controversy was happening in California. And one of the professors at my undergraduate institution, Robert George, was the president of the National Organization for Marriage, which was one of the chief proponents of Proposition 8. And so I and some fellow students, in protest of his involvement, called on the university to issue a referenda saying that it supported gay marriage and that it opposed Proposition 8, that they should revoke the tenure of this specific professor. You know, we really went for it on this one, and the undergraduates passed it, but of course the university didn't do anything, you know, in response to our referenda. And I think that after that process, I sat down with my advisor and had a critical discussion about when it's appropriate for universities to take political stance. Because when a university takes a stance on a contentious political issue, regardless of how right the stance may be, it really is further inviting the politicians and the political realm to then try and insert themselves into the internal operations of the university. And it can be a really slippery slope. So that really applies to the university. For GPSA, I think that there are political issues that we need to be especially clued into. One is this notion of trying to spark a state-level discussion for a tuition policy across the state that tries to manage the rising tuition costs for undergraduates and graduate students alike. I think we need to address the political issue of resource allocation funding at a state level to make sure that that process adequately recognizes the special research mission of this institution. And I think that we need to engage ourselves at the state level on specific issues that directly impact the lives of graduate students here on this campus. You know, I've tried to raise a red flag about legislation that almost passed this session that would have fundamentally altered the graduation requirements in our College of Education, but there were no representatives of graduate students there. And so I think that those are the specific issues that we need to get involved in. But when it gets to broader political issues like gay marriage or even the driver's license issue or immigrants' rights issues that don't directly impact the core mission of the institution or the organization, I think that those are much more difficult discussions and ones that we need to be very careful on. So when it comes to those issues, I'm a little wary, but when it comes to the issues that directly impact the quality of life and the success of graduate and professional students, I think that it's integral and absolutely necessary that we step up our efforts to make those political statements at the state level in the Roundhouse and with the administration. Thank you.
All right, Joseph.
I'd like to thank you, first of all, because you absolutely hit a nail on the top of the head, and I think that that has been one of the fundamental reasons why GPSA has ostracized groups of people on UNM's campus, because people are not always comfortable with political ideas. And I think that GPSA has the opportunity to voice its political concerns, but I think it needs to do so in a way that respects everyone on campus. And I think that that's been a problem, and people realize that GPSA is not focusing on core academic missions of this university. And if it's directly affected, I think absolutely that it should be an advocate for students. But I think in the past, GPSA has taken individual ideas without a consensus of even the council and turned these into political platforms and put themselves in a corner. And I think that's difficult as an organization that's set up to represent the entire student body. And I think these issues are extremely important, like Jacob said. I think they need to be addressed, And I think GPSA's role in that is helping to facilitate more active involvement in student organizations on campus. I mean, we have 400 student, give or take, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, chartered student organizations on campus. And a lot of these, their sole devotion is to work on specific political activities. And I think that those organizations need to be utilized more by students. And if that means GPSA providing funding for their operating budget or appropriations for events to help get students to their activities or to just help spread the word. But I don't think it's necessarily GPSA's role to take on issues which makes other students sometimes feel uncomfortable. I think that there are exceptions, obviously. I think that there are issues that they can encompass the majority, I'm not saying 100%, but a majority of the student body, and those issues can be taken up by GPSA. But I think in the past, GPSA has been used as a political soapbox for individuals to voice concerns, and then people question the validity of the organization, because GPSA's main role is to promote the student voice to the university and to make sure that our needs are met as students. And I think that when we disregard that and we focus on things that are external to the university, people begin to question the purpose of the organization. And I definitely strive to make sure that GPSA remains an organization that's devoted to student interests on campus. And if those interests turn into a political nature as a student body, I think they can be addressed, but I think that we should be concerned about that. As far as ASU&M, I think ASU&M is a little bit weak-footed when it comes to taking positions on things. I think that ASU&M sometimes is a little bit too careful with their voice. As somebody who was involved before I came to graduate school and before I worked, before coming to law school, I was involved in ASU&M, and I know the weaknesses of the organization. And I think GPSA can definitely do a better job at representing students more fairly, and I think that kind of addresses the concern with ASU&M indirectly.
Katie.
So I want to address what Jacob mentioned first. I think the driver's license issue is absolutely an issue that's critical to graduate students. And just one aspect of that is the fact that if you're an international student and you don't have a job on campus, then you don't have a social security number. And therefore, you wouldn't be able to get a driver's license under this particular bill that was presented to the state legislature. And I think that GPSA's job is to advocate for students wherever graduate students have a concern. If that's at the state level, that's where we advocate. If it's at the university level or across the aisle to ASU&M, then that's where we advocate. GPSA's job is to stand up for graduate professional students, whether it's political or not political. If it's connecting students with resources, then that's something that we can do. If it's about actually fighting the good fight for access to higher education, then that's what GPSA should be about. And I think that, just to address something that Joseph mentioned, I don't think that that it's an issue of comfort. I have no problem making people feel uncomfortable if they're doing something wrong. In fact, that's my job as a citizen and as a member of this community. And it would certainly continue to be my job as GPSA president. And I can tell you, even if it were an issue of comfort, I am comfortable fighting increases in tuition and fees. I am comfortable sitting at a table with 15 administrators and saying what you are doing is not right. The Office of Equity and Inclusion absolutely must be a continued institution at this university. And I'm comfortable doing that because I know I'm doing the right thing. And so I think that GPSA is a political organization. And I think one of the things that you have to realize is that every budget is a political object. It's not only political, I think it's a moral object. How are we as a community deciding to spend our money indicates where our values are. And I absolutely think that GPSA must connect and basically it must hold the university administration accountable. ASU&M isn't doing it, graduate students are. And I think that we have seen the leverage that graduate students can have on issues such as budget. For example, the graduate employees together have worked very hard to fight increases in tuition and fees. And sure enough, we have the budget summit on Monday, and the Board of Regents turns around and said, well, 8% tuition increase, that's not acceptable. Let's talk about 6%, let's talk about 5%, how low can we go? And I think that pressure comes because GPSA has stepped up to the table and become a political organization. And I think we should continue to be so. So fundamentally, our job is to be political, and I'm comfortable in that position, and I think that I want to advocate for students in that role.
All right, and what did you say?
Every single decision that's made in our lives is political. And that's why it's so very important to connect the university community with the reality of the overall community. We're not two separate communities. We are students and citizens who not only come to this university as students. That's our role, to come to the university. But we also live in a community. And in our community, and we live in neighborhoods. And in our neighborhoods, we have neighbors. And we share the experiences of those neighbors, and we bring those to the university. Every single decision that is made on our behalf is a political decision. And it should not be treated as external to the student organization. It's internal because it's the students that we represent. The graduate students as a whole come from every segment, every sector of our community. Rich, poor, disenfranchised, inclusive, not inclusive. We represent the entire student body. So when you take a political stance, it's because you believe and you have strong convictions, and because you have the will and the resolve to step forward and not consider what you're doing as being external, but it is internal to your being, whether it's as GPSA representative, to your being as in terms of your neighborhood or as a citizen. It's critically important for us to be engaged with those issues that all of our students are facing in their daily lives. The issue of driver's license, the issue of the DREAM Act, those were major issues that affect our student body. There are also major issues that connect us with our community. Those are issues that we cannot separate from our daily lives. As a woman of color, my whole life has been dictated by political decisions. As a woman in a non-traditional field, I've been an economic developer. I became an economic developer at a time when it was all white, male dominated. All the boardrooms, all the bank corporate rooms, all the institutions were white, male dominated. Every decision that was being made on behalf, whether to invest money for community development in this depressed neighborhood, or whether the decision was at the Board of Regents, whether to support services for students that have been traditionally left out of the system, all those are decisions that are political. Every aspect of our life is political. So it's when we begin to look at things, internal, external, other factors, that we begin to create the divides and the barriers, and so that we cannot come together. That's why it's important that ASU&M, GPSA, all the student organizations, all of the bodies, that we come together as faculty, staff, students, because we are the major stakeholders in this institution. We are empowered by the mere fact that we are stakeholders. We are invested. This university is invested with our participation in the university. So there is no separation. We're all one body together.
All right. And Jacob had a rebuttal.
Yeah, I just want to clear up one thing. The bill that was discussed in the legislature this year contained a provision that would have continued to grant driver's licenses to people who are on an international student visa throughout the duration of their lawful presence. So it really isn't the case that this was directly a graduate student issue. But I really want to come back to this again. When we talk about the political, we have to make sure that we focus our attentions on the issues that really matter to graduate students here in New Mexico and at this university. And that's the budget, that's the cost of tuition, that's research. And those are some hefty battles to fight. And for as much as I would love to use GPSA as my personal platform to follow my own personal political agenda, that's not my role as a president. My role as a president is to work on the issues that impact the community as a whole, and to, yes, be the fighter and be the advocate and speak with the loudest voice that I can to ensure that we actually achieve bold change in those areas.
And I don't want to piggyback too much off of what Jacob said, but I think that the idea of, when you say the word political, there's a connotation to that. A lot of, I mean, whether it's state, national, local, any government, most people think of politics and they think bad. And I'm a political science major, and I still think that there's a connotation with the word political. And that's my biggest problem. And what I focus on is I have principles, and those principles revolve around equity and fairness. And those are something that I always stand for and I fight for all people. And those are things that I believe in. They're very core to me. But what I don't ever want to see the GPSA presidential position used for is a platform for an individual to put forth their own political agenda. And I'm absolutely opposed to that. I think the GPSA president is a facilitator and a communicator, and I think that that is imperative, and that needs to happen. And the voice of the student body needs to come through the council, the president should take it, and they should act upon that. And I think that's what's important, and I think that that's what needs to happen to GPSA. I think the president needs to be more of a facilitator for students, and especially GPSA as an organization.